Well, good afternoon. I'm Audrey. This is Harvey. And I'm just going to give you a short sense of what it is that the prelims are meant to accomplish, and some of this you'll have gotten from the handout, but just to anchor it a little bit. The first year reviews are meant to get you ready for the prelims, and then the prelims are meant to get you ready for your proposal. But there's not a linear relationship. It's really more about quantum leaps. So when you get to the point of the first year review, what you'll have as your background at that point is mostly just courses. You'll have taken course after course after course, and the first year review is meant to shift you into a new gear, help you see, okay, I'm supposed to be more of an agent here, pulling things together for myself, starting to make some theoretical moves of my own. When you get to the prelims, that's what we're looking for. This is your first chance to really pull together two literatures for yourself. So this will be, there'll be two different prelim questions, and you take them both. If you're a full-time student, you take them both in the same semester. If you're part-time, you can take them the same semester. You can take them in consecutive semesters. Each one is meant to be the equivalent of an independent study course. It's a very serious, long take-home paper. But it should be, and we want it to be, exciting in that this is your first chance to say, I want to pull things together and draw a map for myself that is not the map that I've already been given in a class. So, for example, right now I'm teaching a queer theory class. The kinds of papers people will write in there will be based on what I've chosen as the relevant literature. But if somebody wanted to write something on, say, queer theory and post-colonial theory, bring them together, they'd have to invent what's relevant there. How are we going to make these two literatures speak to each other? What the semester of writing should be is actually studying closely the texts you've already chosen. So you need to take usually a summer before, it can be the semester before, to start mapping out for yourself the possibility of these are the relevant texts to read. And if you've taught classes and prepared syllabi, it's much like what you do when you're preparing a syllabus. You read really broadly. You're not reading everything in depth. Some things you're barely skimming to say, oh, this might be relevant, this might not. You go into more depth than some and say, oh, okay, well, yeah, I do need that because it speaks to this. What you're doing over the summer is you're preparing something like a syllabus for yourself. You'll bring that to the faculty that you've chosen for your committee within the first 2 weeks of the fall semester, sometimes spring. And they'll help you decide if those are the best readings for the questions. And they'll also help you with the questions themselves. You'll have been working all along with the chair of your prelim committee to make sure that the questions are something that you actually can find literature for and will, in the end, still want to. So I'm going to leave it there. Harvey, is there anything you want to jump in with before we ask for questions?
Just to build on what Audrey said, think about the prelim, and I know it's difficult to do this, but think about it as an opportunity rather than as a hoop you have to jump through. When I say opportunity, I mean think about the things that you've gone over in class that you haven't had a chance to read about in much greater depth. And if there's and try and identify from that experience the two areas that you want to find out more about and master as much of the basic literature on as you can. This is really the one chance where you'll have a chunk of time to do that. The faculty will probably not be all of one mind about how closely related those reading lists should be to the dissertation. So the guideline, I think, is that you might want to be thinking about one of the lists as more specific to the literature on your dissertation, and another question, for lack of a better word, as something foundational that gives you a chance to really develop your theoretical depth that you think you could then build on in terms of exploring the questions that you want to investigate with your dissertation research. And again, you'll have to negotiate that with your chair and with the other members of your committee as to how they want the balance to look like. Second thing I would add is when you put together your reading list, put together a big one, and then work with your faculty committee to narrow it down. So come in to your meeting with them, they will say to you, bring me a list of the kind of things you want to look at. I would start with all the things that you think you've noted in the course of your coursework that you would want to read, that you think are going to be necessary to inform your investigation of that particular topic, and then work with them to narrow it down, because you can't read them all for your prelim. And the faculty will probably ask you to work with them to narrow it down, and out of that develop the questions. The final thing that Audrey mentioned that we should emphasize is that in order to do this well, you need to start thinking about this a semester before the time you actually sit down and enroll to do the writing of the exam. If you leave the reading and the writing to the same semester, it's too much work to do all at the same time. So we encourage everybody to start thinking about what areas they want to read in and putting together their committee a semester before they think they're going to enroll to actually write the 2 questions or the 1 question if you're a part-time student. You want to add anything more to that?
We say we're going to answer questions, but then we just do all the talking. Would you like to add something?
No.
I will.
That's the danger. We should be quiet, right?
I am going to add something, and then I won't even ask Harvey if he wants to add anything.
I'll try and be quiet.
It's a faculty problem. When you're thinking about your topics, if you're not yet at a point where you feel real certainty about your eventual topic, that's okay. You can choose to explore an area that you're certain that you will be teaching in. So, for example, if you know that you're going to be teaching multicultural ed, that's part of how you see yourself as a professor, then you might say, well, you know, there's a whole area of that I don't really know that literature. You might explore that for one of your questions. You also might think of one of the questions as sort of holding yourself answerable to a field you really don't want to address that much in your dissertation, but people will always ask you about. So I'll give you the example of if you're a Latina or African American and you're writing about black or brown approaches to educational caring, you might not want to spend a lot of time in your dissertation talking about white feminist conceptions of caring. And that would be fine, because you want to put something forward that's not accountable to white theories. But that doesn't mean people won't ask you. People will ask you. You'll go to conferences, you'll do job talks. You need to know the literature that came before. The place to do that might be your prelim question as a way to master that literature and then move on. So now we'll open it up to questions from you folks.
And Audrey, as people ask questions, would you mind just repeating the question
Sure.
that way when future revisions of this, so people can hear what was asked? Thank you.
Everything's clear. Nobody's anxious.
I have a question. When
Ed has a question.
what role should I expect my committee to take in this process from beginning to end?
Yeah, I'll repeat the question, and Harvey will answer. What role should students expect their committee to take from the beginning to the end of the prelim process?
I think there are 2 or 3 things we should probably review on the committee. First, you need 3 members. Typically, all 3 of those members are from the department. It's not a requirement that they all be from the department, but it's a recommendation. And the reason we recommend that is because this process is unique to ECS. And if you bring in somebody from outside the department, you have to educate them to this process. Now, having said that, students often think that somebody in another department is the most appropriate person to have on their committee, so by all means ask that person. Just be prepared for the fact that if you bring in a member from outside the department, they probably will need a little time getting up to speed with regard to what this process means in ECS, because they likely have not been part of it before and have not had it in their own department.
And it may be more of a burden than they're prepared to take on. We all know that the prelims are part of our job description, but somebody in, say, history might say, you know what, I could be on your committee, but just for the dissertation.
Right. The second point is these 3 people that you choose do not have to be on your dissertation committee. Oftentimes they are, or oftentimes some of them may be, but they do not have the same people who you subsequently ask to serve on your dissertation committee. The dissertation committee, remember, requires 5 people. But it's possible that in the course of working through your prelim with these 3 faculty, you realize that one of them or 2 of them you don't work that well with, or that they have interests that are really pushing you in a direction that you don't want to go. It's fine to say, this was wonderful to have you on my prelim committee, but I'm going to ask other people to be on my dissertation committees. And the faculty, I think, is totally fine with that. They understand that their commitment to you is to be on your prelim committee, not necessarily your dissertation committee. Third, you will work most closely, especially initially, with your chair on this committee. They are the chair. He or she is the person you should work with in your first go-round on your reading syllabus. They may also be able to suggest to you other faculty who would be good serving on your committee if you're having a hard time figuring out who to put on that committee. However, you don't want to leave the other 2 people on your committee in the dark. Once you've begun to develop those reading lists, you want to start bringing them into the conversation as well. So start with your chair, begin the work on it with your chair, and then build your committee from those discussions with the person you think would be most appropriate for the chair, and then as soon as you can, start bringing in the other 2 members of the committee so that everybody can get up to speed and know where you are going and what you're trying to do.